In 1996, something almost impossible happened. One of the most famous couples in America managed to get married without the world knowing. No paparazzi, no headlines, no crowds. Just 40 guests, a tiny wooden church, and a remote island hidden off the coast of Georgia. For months, the media had been watching John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette closely, hoping to catch even the smallest hint that the couple was planning a wedding. Every move they made in New York seemed to attract cameras. Photographers waited outside restaurants, outside their apartment, even outside their favorite walking routes. But somehow, the couple pulled off what many thought was impossible. They disappeared just long enough to say their vows, and the world didn't find out until a single photograph suddenly revealed everything. Yet the secrecy surrounding their wedding wasn't just about avoiding photographers. Behind the scenes, there was a carefully crafted plan that felt closer to a covert operation than a traditional wedding. The steps they took to keep the event hidden were meticulous, strategic, and at times almost unbelievable. And it all started with the reality of their everyday lives. To understand why the wedding had to be so secret, you have to understand the attention surrounding their relationship. John F. Kennedy Jr. wasn't simply a celebrity. To many Americans, he was the closest thing the country had to royalty. As the son of President John F. Kennedy and former First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, he had been in the public eye since the moment he was born. Millions of people had watched him grow up. From the heartbreaking images of him saluting his father's casket as a child, to his rise as a charming young lawyer and magazine publisher. By the 1990s, he had become one of the most recognizable and admired men in the country. Carolyn Bessette came from a very different world. She worked as a publicist for the fashion brand Calvin Klein and had built a reputation for her quiet confidence and refined sense of style. People who knew her often described her as reserved, thoughtful, and deeply private. When she and John started dating, the attention quickly became overwhelming. Photographers followed them through the streets of Manhattan. Simple dinners out turned into chaotic scenes with flashing cameras and shouting reporters. Even routine errands could attract a crowd. Friends of the couple later suggested that the constant media pressure made them extremely protective of their relationship. So, when they decided to marry, they made one thing clear from the start: the press could never find out. Planning the wedding became something closer to a carefully organized secret mission. The process reportedly took nearly 6 months, and every detail had to remain confidential. The guest list was kept incredibly small. Invitations were limited to only a handful of trusted family members and close friends. Those invited understood that discretion was essential. Travel arrangements were handled quietly, with different guests arriving at different times, so nothing would attract attention. Instead of selecting a glamorous city venue where photographers might easily gather, the couple chose a place so remote that most Americans had never even heard of it: Cumberland Island, Georgia. The island sits quietly off the coast, surrounded by miles of untouched nature. Wild horses roam freely across open fields. Tall oak trees draped with Spanish moss line quiet dirt paths. Long stretches of empty beach meet the Atlantic Ocean with almost no development in sight. There are no major hotels, no busy tourist attractions, and very few permanent residents. Reaching the island requires a ferry ride or a small private plane, making it the perfect place for a wedding that needed to remain hidden. But the island wasn't chosen just for its privacy. For John Kennedy Jr., it also carried a deeper meaning. At the center of the wedding plans stood a small historic building called the First African Baptist Church. The structure was modest, with only 8 wooden pews inside. There was no air conditioning and very little lighting. In fact, much of the ceremony would take place by candlelight. Despite its simplicity, the church held emotional significance for John. Years earlier, after the tragic passing of his uncle Robert Kennedy, residents of Cumberland Island had gathered inside that same church to hold a memorial service in his honor. The story reportedly moved John deeply. To him, the church symbolized something meaningful: community, family memory, and quiet reflection. When the time came to choose a wedding location, he insisted that the ceremony take place there. Still, keeping the plan hidden until the final moment was not easy. In the days leading up to the wedding, a few locals began noticing something unusual. Small groups of visitors were quietly arriving on the island by plane and ferry. They didn't cause much attention at first, but there was a growing sense that something important might be happening. Inside the tiny church, just 40 guests would gather to witness the ceremony. Among them were some of the people closest to the couple. John's cousin Anthony Red Zewell served as his best man. His sister Carolyn Kennedy attended with her husband and their children, who played special roles in the ceremony. Two of the Kennedy children served as flower girls, while another acted as the ring bearer. Although John's mother, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, had passed away 2 years earlier, many guests said their presence was felt throughout the celebration. One of her closest friends helped select the flowers used in the ceremony. Her longtime butler assisted with arranging greenery around the church altar. These small details made the day feel connected to the family history that had shaped John's life. Then came the moment that would quietly influence the world of fashion. When Carolyn Bessette arrived at the church, she wasn't wearing the kind of dramatic wedding gown many people might have expected from such a famous bride. Instead, her look was strikingly simple. Her dress had been designed by Narciso Rodriguez, a close friend from her days working in fashion. The gown was made from pearl-colored silk crepe and fell to the floor in a smooth, elegant line. There were no elaborate decorations, no heavy lace, and no dramatic layers. She paired the dress with a delicate veil and long silk gloves. The effect was understated, yet unforgettable. According to people who were present that day, the dress fit Carolyn so precisely that the designer had to make final adjustments while she was getting ready. Some guests later described the fabric as flowing over her like liquid silk. Fashion insiders would eventually describe the gown as revolutionary. At a time when many bridal dresses were ornate and extravagant, Carolyn's minimal look helped spark a lasting trend towards simplicity and wedding fashion. But inside the candlelit church, the focus was not on style or trends, it was on the ceremony itself. The service was intimate and brief. The couple stood before family and friends, while a priest who had long been connected to the Kennedy family led the ceremony. Because the church was so dimly lit, parts of the service were reportedly read using a small flashlight. The soft glow of candles filled the room, creating an atmosphere that guests later described as emotional and joyful. There were smiles, laughter, and even a few tears as John and Carolyn exchanged their vows. When the ceremony ended, the newly married couple stepped outside the small church together. And that's when a moment happened that would quietly make history. A photographer named Dennis Reggie had been given rare permission to document the wedding. As the couple walked down the church steps, he captured a single photograph. In the image, John gently lifts Carolyn's hand and kisses it. Behind them stands the small white church. Carolyn looks up at him with a soft smile. The moment feels spontaneous, elegant, and almost storybook-like. For several days, the public had no idea the wedding had even taken place. Then, the photograph was released. Almost instantly, it became one of the most famous wedding images ever published. Newspapers and magazines around the world printed the photo, revealing that one of America's most watched couples had managed to marry completely out of sight. Yet the celebration itself was far from over. After the ceremony, the guests traveled a short distance to the Grayfield Inn, a historic mansion surrounded by massive oak trees on the island. The inn, with its quiet charm and relaxed atmosphere, became the setting for the couple's private reception. The gathering was warm and intimate. Friends shared stories about the couple, family members laughed and talked late into the evening. At one point, a three-tiered white wedding cake was brought out for the celebration. Later, John and Carolyn shared their first dance together to the song Forever in My Life by Prince. During the reception, Senator Ted Kennedy delivered a heartfelt toast that reportedly moved many of the guests to tears. The words reflected not only the happiness of the moment, but also the deep family bonds that surrounded the couple. At one point in the evening, John himself stood and spoke to the room. According to those present, he said that Carolyn had made him the happiest man alive. For a brief moment, away from the cameras and headlines,